thank you for being with us here all
Pleasure.
day.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you've had a chance to hear what everyone's thinking about with regards to all of these spaces. And in this very unique role that you've got at Gucci, you're able to be kind of partake in all of it. Can you tell us a little bit about, in the first instance, what is Gucci Vault and Metaverse Ventures? And what's your role in kind of leading it?
Sure. When you're a 102-year-old brand, making sure that you have the ability to innovate and the space to innovate is fundamentally important. And a few years ago, as we were looking at what it would take to create exponential growth in a business of our scale, we realized that it would be very important to create something, a team, a unit that could benefit from the capacity of the core brand, but at the same time be super agile, take advantage of test and learn opportunities and experiments. And thus we gave birth to what internally we described as Dream Big, meaning, as it says, the opportunity to think about big ideas and move quickly towards them. And in a more substantive way, we felt that we needed a brand that was adjacent to the core, and so the Vault was born. And through Vault, we're able to do, I would say that we're able to push ourselves into places where, for the core brand, it might be considered to be too risky, but through Vault, we have that playground space, so that if by chance we were to make a mistake, we're not going to impact the core brand.
Got it. Okay. So you were here earlier today for Michael Wolf's presentation, where he showed that amazing chart that showed, the hype cycle around Metaverse and NFTs, which I think peaked in 2022.
Yeah.
And I was doing a little bit of digging. And in our State of Fashion report 2022, you said that you saw the metaverse opportunity as one which could be, I quote, very significant driver of revenue growth. And I'm just wondering, given the reset that we've been talking about today around this space, how have your views changed around that very significant revenue growth?
By the way, I thought his presentation was fantastic in 20 minutes to see that data, because it confirmed everything that I believe in terms of the long-term potential of the metaverse. And I thought that his explanation of, if you will, the adjacency of Web3 technology, but the metaverse as a kind of experience, and the entry point being gaming particularly, is absolutely on the money. I mean, what's happened is we went through, as is often the case with a new kind of technological opportunity, a Wild West experience where there was incredible speculation. And I see it more as a correction. I think that we're now at a much more sensible place where you've got individuals, companies, and in fact, you've done a great job today of having some of those people on this stage who are very serious about what they're doing. They understand what the opportunity is. They understand what the foundations are that you need to have in place. And then, going back to what I said, for a brand like Gucci, we see through the test and learn experiments that you kind of saw in that sizzle reel, loyalty, community building, authentication, which is a slightly kind of different track, but ultimately revenue. And of course, when we set up Dream Big, and we have other business streams like secondhand and vintage in the Dream Big universe, we're looking for revenue opportunities. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. I was in Los Angeles about 10 days ago, and I had lunch with the co-presidents of the Grammys, and they were telling me that they had 12 million viewers of the Grammys, the live event. 2 hours later, I went and did a tour of the Riot HQ, and they were telling me that they have 50 million viewers every time they have one of their championships. So, I mean, you can see how the world is changing. And, we've heard about the super connected, if you will. And there's going to be a trickle down. I mean, we're all to a lesser or greater degree on that path.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about environments like Riot Games or Roblox, is the gaming opportunity is where Gucci's focused a lot of its attention. But when I see that stuff happening, when we heard about Alice having a Gucci bag in the Roblox environment,
Yeah.
how does someone grow from those kinds of virtual environments into real life customers? And you guys have done things all the way from a customizable, $12 sneaker to like very, very expensive, multi-thousand euro Dionysus Gucci bags in virtual spaces. Like in both of those scenarios, the low price, innovative, targeted at a young customer, and then the collectible thing that the market's kind of crashed.
Yeah.
How does that translate into real dollars in the real world?
Well, look, that's a huge question. I mean, that sneaker that you're referring to was in 2020, and we were really kind of at the leading edge then in what we were trying to do with that sneaker. So we were empowering our community to create, and of course, someone referred earlier on to the notion of the ability that you have in the digital world to self-express. So with that experiment, even if it was at $12, which was the final version of the sneaker, so to speak, everything that went into the conceptualization of that experience was informing us about what the potential is for the future in terms of monetization. But monetization is not just in terms of straight revenue that you might get through an experience. It's in building loyal customers over time, the lifetime cycle of a customer. Now, of course, in Roblox, we're definitely dealing with, generally speaking, a younger customer. But to give you some numbers, we were in Roblox for 2 weeks at the very beginning. We had an experiment with them for 2 weeks. At 19 million visitors to our Gucci garden in 2 weeks. And we had a number of digital collectibles that were limited. And at a certain point, the Dionysus bag was selling for around $4,000 in Roblox, which is more than the physical product in the real world. So, I mean, all of this is, again, informing us about where we can place our bets in the longer term and how we can be much more scientific in what we're doing. And so I was saying to you just behind the scenes, we would see that from 2018, when we began experimenting with gaming, to where we are today, we've very much been in a test and learn phase. I believe that we're now in a place, now that the correction has happened, where we can actually place some long-term bets. And to that end, we will be announcing in the coming weeks some very important strategic partnerships that are long-term partnerships that allow us to capitalize on the experience and the expertise of creators, and obviously our community and our longevity as a brand.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's super interesting. The things that I've been hearing a lot today is around like loyalty, community, and then also kind of customer relationship building. And if you think about for those of you who don't know, Robert's had this kind of quite esteemed career on the marketing side of luxury brands on both sides of the Atlantic, right?
You're trying to say I'm old.
No, I mean,
it's all right.
I met Robert when he was, I think you were at Armani or somewhere when I first met you.
I don't remember.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
And it's really interesting that, one of the use cases a lot of people are talking about today is just like building customer relationships, which, would fall under marketing. Like, ultimately, is the short-term use case really about, you talk about 19 million visitors in Gucci Garden. Isn't that just a new form of marketing?
So, it's a good question. My team used to be called Marketing and Communications. A few years ago, I changed the name to Brand and Client Engagement because at the end of the day, a brand to be successful, and I was fascinated with the experimental AI magic presentation because I know art is in artificial, but art is something very different. And I think that the most successful brands today are driven by human creativity, intuition, foresight. And to that end, I think that a brand like Gucci, and yes, I've been doing marketing a long time, it needs to understand how do you take advantage of new technologies in order to do the authentic, and I know it's a cliche, I'm sorry for using the word, but it's super important. How do you go into these communities authentically? I mean, we talked about Discord earlier on, and we went into Discord quite a while ago, and if you don't go into a community like that, understanding how to respect the community, it can be a huge boomerang. So marketing today is something that is much more complex because of obviously all the opportunities that data presents, but at the root of it, if you really want to have a successful brand, you've got to have emotion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's that's clear. One of the other things that you've been doing at Gucci is buying virtual real estate, and I think it was about a year ago that this announcement came into my inbox that Gucci was buying a piece of virtual real estate in Sandbox. For those of us who are not yet in the virtual real estate world, like how do you go about deciding that you want to buy some virtual real estate, and how do you imagine? I think later on you've actually launched a physical space, not a virtual space on that virtual real estate. Like, how does that fit into your wider strategy?
So again, just going back to what we're able to do with Vault, in a way it's, I call it a Trojan horse. Someone in my team came up with that concept, which I think is perfect, because it allows us, again, to experiment. So the Sandbox, it's like if I said to myself, okay, Times Square, there's a great billboard there. It's an opportunity to engage with the community that is going into Times Square in the real world. We evaluated that the Sandbox has potential as a place for gathering people together, and we want to be able to have a presence there. And over time, because Sandbox is itself an experiment, over time, we want to bring to life different experiences. And, the merging of physical and digital experiences is at the core of everything we're talking about today. And that is the essence. The Metaverse is an opportunity to embrace the digital self. And for the moment, because we haven't conquered interoperability, it means that you have to be able and willing to be present in multiple environments. One day, hopefully soon, what we create, and by the way, the sneaker that you were mentioning was one of the first examples of a sneaker that was designed in 2018 to allow the user to take that sneaker into at least 2 environments. So we were pioneering with interoperability.
Got it. Okay. Last year on this stage, I had Benoit Pagotto from Artifact sitting here. And I got to know Benoit shortly after he sold like $3 million of virtual sneakers in like 4 minutes in the early days of the hype cycle. And most of you will know his company was subsequently bought by Nike. And one of the criticisms that Benoit has had for big brands like Gucci and others is that they come into this space, they don't understand it, there's no authenticity about it. How do you build in that authentic understanding of this very, very unique world? Like Nike's basically gone and said, we're just gonna buy Artifact. How are you thinking about scaling in the space? Would you consider buying or acquiring companies in this space to get that real authentic engagement and positioning?
I will not comment on Benoit's comments on other brands. I'll talk about Gucci. And specifically, again, I use the word authenticity because it is fundamentally important that we don't assume that we know everything. And that especially when it comes to going onto a platform, going into a universe, a metaverse, understanding what is unique about that. So, back in the day, we went into The Sims. And the interesting experience there is that we worked with co-creators who were passionate Sims players to create our experience. Then we went to EA Sports and said, oh, by the way, we're going into Sims, but we're going in with your community. And they were like, you're doing what? And to me, to your point then, how do we think about the future? As well as making sure that we're working with the community, there could be opportunities to work more closely, and I've kind of inferred that there might be an announcement soon, with strategic partners. One day, who knows how that kind of business relationship might develop. Caring, our parent company, have in fact an investment arm that is investing in opportunities like this for the future.
Got it. The other thing that I'm sure a lot of people are curious about when it comes to Gucci is this unique moment that Gucci's at, right? So for those of you who aren't following along, Alessandro Michele, the creative director, who was responsible alongside your boss Marco Bizzarri for transforming Gucci into the 10 billion euro business that it is today, left late last year. Earlier this year, a new creative director, Sabato De Sarno, was announced as the person that was going to step into Alessandro's shoes. But in the interim period, you're in this transition. And then there's this wider discussion about a sustainable elevation strategy at Gucci, which is like trying to balance out the very, very strong fashion DNA that Gucci has from creative directors like Tom Ford and Alessandro in your history, while also thinking back to the original heritage of Gucci, Mr. Guccio Gucci, and I think he was he worked at the Savoy Hotel in London, and he saw all of the luggage, and that's where this kind of history of Gucci as a luggage brand came about. How does innovating in virtual spaces where you're selling virtual products to really young customers fit into this sustainable elevation strategy?
Well, I mean, thank you, because you condensed the history of Gucci very quickly into a few seconds. But you touched on really important aspects of Gucci. And of course, every brand is different. Every brand story is different. And Gucci is extremely fortunate to have a pretty unique history. So to your point, in 1921, Guccio Gucci set up his company, having worked as a porter at the Savoy Hotel. And he invested himself in bringing beautiful product made in Italy that was inspired by the jet set arriving at the Savoy Hotel. That legacy, and probably Gucci has more legacy than pretty much any other brand. What I mean by that is the archive is incredibly rich in terms of symbols, iconography, storytelling. And Alessandro, who very successfully integrated the archive, he knew the archive better than anyone else, having been 13 years at Gucci before he became the creative director, showed how through creativity, which has to be at the core to be successful because that's the emotional part, you can bring forward the story of a brand. And so thinking of today and where we are, and by the way, we're not the only brand that goes through creative change. I mean, creative directors do come and go because there are creative cycles, and that's what creates the excitement of fashion. But we're a brand that is proudly able to bring forward storytelling based on an archive. So bringing that into the metaverse, if we think about all that we're doing in the metaverse, we always have an eye on creativity, creating the emotion, but underpinning that is the story of the brand and all that rich storytelling that is built up over 102 years. So we always have to make sure that there is that connection between the real world and the digital world to make it coherent, to make it authentic, to make it make sense.
Okay. My last question for you is advice. And as someone with an esteemed career, you're well positioned to give advice. But for people interested in this part, this very exciting, dynamic part of the industry, how do they get involved? What are you looking for in the teams that you're building?
Yeah.
What are the skills that are required to work in a space that's so dynamic and fast moving?
Well, it's a good question, and I think first and foremost, the Marco Bizzarri, when he decided that it was important to have a dedicated team, the Dream Big team, he recognized that in order to be agile, in order to take advantage of opportunities, you need that dedicated squad, let's say. So I think my first piece of advice is this cannot be a night job for people doing a day job, okay? Even though it is. Second of all, in terms of the people, I mean, clearly today there are digital natives, the super users, okay, who spend their lives gaming, social messaging, and so on and so forth. So you definitely need people who are passionate, who understand the space, but it doesn't necessarily mean they've got to come from a company that maybe we've hired them from. We've nurtured people from the inside the organization who've expressed an interest, and for them, it is a passion. So I would say, and then going back to the old path, you hopefully match that with a little bit of experience and wisdom, and you come up with a good mix.
Yeah, okay. Well, Robert, that was very illuminating. I'm very interested to see what this mysterious announcement you keep alluding to is. So stay tuned to BoF for that announcement. And thank you very, very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. All right. Thank you.